Sometimes it feels like the whole world is pushing against our peace. One unexpected message, one sharp word from someone we trust, one twist in our plans, and suddenly our calm slips away like sand through open fingers. It's not that life is getting harder, it's that we were never taught how to stand steady in the middle of it. The Buddha didn't promise that the world would change for us. He showed us how to change the way we meet the world. He taught that real strength isn't found by controlling what happens outside, but by mastering the way we respond inside. Today, we're going to explore 10 timeless Buddhist principles that can help you reach a place where nothing, no conflict, no setback, no chaos can truly shake you. These are practical, simple tools you can start using immediately, and they're more powerful than you might think. If you appreciate the work we're doing here to share this wisdom, there's a simple free favor I'll ask. Take a moment to hit that subscribe button and make sure you don't skip any part of this video. You'll want to stay with me all the way through because every principle builds on the last, leading you step by step toward a calmer, stronger you. There's something quietly unsettling about drifting through life without a strong sense of why you're here. Some days you feel pulled by the expectations of others. Other days you're driven by fleeting emotions, bouncing from one task to another, never quite feeling grounded. It's exhausting, isn't it? Deep down we crave a clear direction, a deeper meaning, something to tether us when the winds of uncertainty blow. The Buddha understood this human longing deeply. He taught that without right intention, without a firm internal compass, we become like a leaf carried away by the currents of the world, never rooted, never truly free. When the Buddha spoke about the Noble Eightfold Path, the second step he emphasized was right intention, right thought, right purpose. Not just any purpose crafted out of ambition or fear, but a purpose born from wisdom, compassion, and understanding. Purpose, in the Buddhist sense, is not about chasing external success or worldly validation. It's about aligning your heart and mind with values that bring real peace, not just to you, but to everyone you touch. It's about living deliberately, not reactively. Think about how different life feels when you have clarity about what matters most. When you know you are here to cultivate kindness, to embody patience, to deepen wisdom. Suddenly the little annoyances don't rattle you so much. Setbacks don't feel like punishments. Success doesn't become a trap. Every experience, pleasant or painful, is seen through the steady lens of your chosen path. That clarity is what transforms the wild unpredictability of life into a sacred journey, not a chaotic mess. Finding that firm purpose isn't something that happens overnight. It requires stillness, reflection, and brutal honesty with yourself. The Buddha often retreated into solitude to see clearly beyond the noise of the world. In the same way, we must be willing to sit with ourselves to ask uncomfortable questions. What am I really seeking? What lights up my heart beyond temporary pleasure? Where do I want to grow, not just succeed? Purpose isn't discovered in the rush of daily demands. It's uncovered in the quiet moments when you listen deeply to your own heart. Once you glimpse your true purpose, it becomes your anchor. Life doesn't magically get easier, storms will still come, but you're not as easily thrown around by them. Challenges transform from threats into invitations to deepen your practice. You start to see obstacles not as barriers, but as teachers. That difficult co-worker becomes a lesson in compassion. That unexpected failure becomes a lesson in perseverance, because every experience now serves something bigger inside you. The Buddha's life itself is the perfect example of this. After leaving the palace and seeing the truth of suffering in the world, Siddhartha didn't spend his life chasing pleasure or running from pain. He walked the middle path with an unwavering purpose, the pursuit of awakening, not just for himself, but for the liberation of all beings. No temptation, no hardship, no loneliness could pull him away from that. His clarity became his power. His purpose illuminated every step, even when the path was hard and uncertain. And here's something important. Your purpose doesn't need to be grand in the eyes of the world. You don't have to be a monk or a revolutionary. Your purpose might simply be to live with more kindness, to raise children with love, to work with integrity, to move through each day with mindfulness and gentleness. What matters is that it's yours, chosen with awareness, not inherited from the expectations of others or the pressures of society. Some days, it feels like the mind has a life of its own. One moment, you're calm and focused, and the next, you're caught in a whirlwind of doubt, fear, anger, or distraction. It happens so quickly that you barely notice the shift until you're already tangled in it. The Buddha saw this struggle more clearly than anyone. He taught that the real battlefield is not out there in the world, it's within. If we want real freedom, it's not about changing everything around us, it's about mastering the restless, reactive mind inside us. Mastering the mind doesn't mean suppressing your thoughts or pretending you don't feel what you feel. It means learning to observe the movements of your mind without getting swept away by them, like sitting by a river and watching the water flow without jumping in. In the teachings of Buddhism, this is the foundation of mindfulness, sati. The steady awareness of what arises within us, without clinging, without resisting. The Buddha compared an untrained mind to a monkey, jumping wildly from branch to branch, chasing every sound, every movement, every craving. Without training, our thoughts pull us into anger, jealousy, fear, and endless craving. We react to every insult, every bad driver, every unkind word like it's a life or death emergency. But when the mind is trained, when it becomes calm, steady, and clear, it becomes our greatest ally instead of our worst enemy. Training the mind begins with small, simple practices. The next time frustration bubbles up, take a breath before you react. When someone says something harsh, notice the sting, but don't let it pull you into a storm. Just notice. Watch how quickly the mind wants to defend, to attack, to explain. Create a small space between what happens and what you choose to do next. In that space lies your freedom. One of the Buddha's most powerful teachings is that we are not our thoughts. Thoughts arise, thoughts pass away, like clouds drifting across the sky. They are not you, they are simply passing phenomena. When you really understand this, not just intellectually but deeply, you stop taking every thought so personally. You stop believing every fear, every judgment, every impulse that pops into your mind. You begin to see that you have a choice. Daily meditation is one of the most effective ways to cultivate this clarity. Even 5 or 10 minutes of sitting quietly, watching your breath, noticing your thoughts without chasing them, starts to reshape your inner landscape. Over time, you build the strength to remain calm, even when the mind tries to drag you into old patterns. You become the master, not the servant, of your own consciousness. Mastering the mind also means being kind to yourself when you stumble. The Buddha taught that the path to awakening is a gradual one, walked step by step with patience and compassion. You will lose your temper sometimes. You will get caught in fear or sadness. That doesn't mean you're failing. It simply means you're human. What matters is that you notice, you return to awareness, and you keep practicing. There's a quiet danger that most people don't notice until it's already rooted deep inside. It's not some dramatic enemy you can see coming. It's subtle, it's slow. It's what we allow into the sacred space of our minds without even realizing it. The Buddha spoke often about the importance of guarding the sense doors, the gateways through which sights, sounds, thoughts, and feelings enter our consciousness. He taught that if we aren't mindful, the world can plant seeds in our mind, seeds of fear, greed, anger, confusion, and if left unchecked, they grow wild, choking out our peace. Think about it. Every news headline you read, Every conversation you have, every piece of content you scroll past, is like a visitor knocking at the door of your mind. If you open the door without question, you're giving away your most precious possession, your attention. And whatever you let in will start shaping the way you think, the way you feel, even the way you live. Guarding your inner world doesn't mean building a wall and hiding from life. It means being wise about what you allow to influence you. It means asking yourself, does this strengthen my compassion, or does it feed my anger? Does this bring clarity, or does it stir up confusion? The Buddha encouraged his disciples to stay mindful, to stay discerning, not out of fear, but out of deep respect for the power of the mind to create suffering or liberation. One simple practice is to treat your mind like a beautiful, well-tended garden. You wouldn't dump trash in your garden and expect flowers to grow. In the same way, if you constantly feed your mind negativity, gossip, outrage, fear, you're planting weeds. But if you nurture it with kindness, with wisdom, with peaceful reflections, you're planting the seeds of a life filled with joy and strength. Start by paying close attention to what you consume daily, not just food, but information, conversations, emotions. Notice the energy you feel after spending time in certain places or with certain people. Do you feel heavier, more anxious, more restless? Or do you feel lighter, calmer, more inspired? Your body and mind are constantly giving you feedback if you listen. Surround yourself with sources of nourishment. Read texts that deepen your understanding. Spend time with people who uplift your spirit. Choose entertainment that leaves you feeling expanded, not depleted. And when negativity inevitably finds its way in, don't panic. Just notice it. Don't feed it. The Buddha taught that even a small unmindful thought can grow into a powerful force if we water it with attention. But if we let it arise and pass without clinging, it has no strength. Guarding your inner world also means being mindful of your own self-talk. Sometimes the most harmful intrusions aren't from the outside. They're the voices inside us that repeat old patterns of doubt, shame, anger. When those old voices rise up, meet them with compassion. Don't push them away in hatred. That only makes them stronger. Acknowledge them. Smile at them even. Then gently return your mind to something true, your breath, your intention, your deeper values. There's something about criticism that touches the most sensitive parts of us. Even when we know better, even when we tell ourselves not to take it personally, a harsh word can cut deeper than we expect. It's almost as if a single comment can undo all the quiet confidence we worked so hard to build. But the Buddha taught that the true source of suffering is not what others say or do, it's how we relate to it. Criticism, like praise, is just another wave on the surface of life. If we learn how to meet it wisely, we no longer have to be tossed around by it. One of the first steps is understanding that criticism itself is not inherently bad. In fact, from the Buddhist view, being corrected, being shown a blind spot, is one of the most valuable gifts on the path. The Buddha praised the friend or teacher who points out our faults, comparing them to a guide who shows us the safest road. But the mind often resists correction, doesn't it? Our pride flares up. Our self-image feels under attack. Instead of listening, we armor up. We prepare to defend, to explain, to attack back. Yet every time we react like this, we miss a chance to grow. Handling criticism with wisdom begins with a simple shift, seeing it not as a personal attack, but as an opportunity to understand ourselves more clearly. When someone offers feedback, whether delivered skillfully or clumsily, the first question to quietly ask yourself is there something useful here? Not how dare they, not they don't know anything about me. Simply, is there something true here that can help me wake up a little more? If there is, bow to it. Take it in with gratitude. Let it refine you. Let it polish away the parts of yourself that are still rough, reactive, or unaware. And if the criticism is false, unfair, or cruel, the Buddha taught patience, khanti. as one of the greatest strengths. You don't need to fight every wrong word. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. Instead, stay steady, stay rooted in your own integrity. If your heart is clean, no outside judgment can truly harm you. It's also wise to remember that sometimes criticism says more about the speaker than about you. People often project their own fears, frustrations, or insecurities onto others without realizing it. When someone lashes out, it usually comes from their own suffering. Seeing this clearly doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it frees you from carrying unnecessary wounds. There's a story from the Buddha's life that captures this beautifully. Once a man insulted the Buddha repeatedly, trying to provoke him. The Buddha simply listened calmly. When the man finished, the Buddha said, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, confused, said, "To the one who offered it." The Buddha smiled and replied, "In the same way, I do not accept your anger. It remains with you." Such is the power of non-reactivity, of inner sovereignty. When you master the art of handling criticism, you walk through the world lighter. You're not constantly looking over your shoulder, worrying what others think. You're not living on a shaky foundation of external approval. Instead, your peace comes from within. You become like a tree rooted deep in the earth, able to bend in the wind without breaking. Some days it feels like people go out of their way to push every button we have. A sharp word here, a careless action there, and before we know it, offense blooms in the heart like a fire catching dry wood. It's such a fast, almost automatic reaction that we barely notice it happening. But the Buddha saw this cycle for what it truly is, a trap. Not a trap set by others, but a trap we unknowingly build for ourselves when we cling too tightly to hurt. When someone offends us, it feels personal. It feels like an attack on our worth. But in the teachings of Buddhism, the Buddha reminds us that nothing outside of us has the power to truly injure our true nature. The mind interprets, the mind judges, the mind says, "They wronged me, and I must carry this anger to stay safe." Yet in truth, holding on to offense is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. The only heart you burden is your own. One of the most powerful shifts we can make is to see offense not as a reason to harden, but as an opportunity to soften wisely. Every moment of hurt is a mirror, showing us where we are still caught, where our ego still demands recognition, where our wounds still seek validation. Instead of asking, "Why did they hurt me?" we can start asking, "What in me still needs healing?" That doesn't mean excusing cruelty or injustice. It means refusing to let someone else's ignorance or carelessness plant seeds of bitterness in your own heart. The Buddha taught that when we cling to anger, it blinds us. It robs us of wisdom, patience, and compassion, the very qualities that free us from suffering. When someone offends you, you stand at a crossroads. You can feed the fire of anger, replaying the offense over and over in your mind, building walls between yourself and the world. Or you can choose another way, the way of mindfulness, the way of letting go. When you feel the sting of offense, pause, breathe, recognize it for what it is. A temporary feeling, not a permanent reality. Like a cloud passing through an open sky, it will move on if you don't chase after it. You are not the offense, you are not the pain. You are the spaciousness that can hold it all without being consumed. One practice the Buddha encouraged is metta, loving kindness. When someone offends you, silently wish them peace, wish them healing, wish them freedom from whatever pain caused them to act in harmful ways. This isn't about being passive, it's about protecting your own heart. Carrying resentment is like carrying a burning coal in your pocket. It hurts you more than anyone else. Metta is how you set it down. It's also helpful to remember that most offenses are more about the other person's suffering than about you. People who lash out are often hurting inside. They carry their own unseen burdens. Recognizing this doesn't mean you invite harm into your life. It simply means you no longer take every wound as a reflection of your own worth. There's incredible freedom in realizing you don't have to pick up every stone thrown your way. You don't have to accept every judgment, every slight, every hurt as a defining truth. You can hear it, see it for what it is, and keep walking your path with dignity and compassion. Some feelings seem so heavy that we start to believe they are a permanent part of who we are. Fear can wrap itself around your decisions without you even realizing it. Shame can whisper in the quiet corners of your mind, telling you that you're not enough, that your past defines you. But the Buddha taught something profoundly liberating. These emotions are not who you are. They are visitors, impermanent, shifting, like clouds in the open sky. When fear rises, it feels urgent. Your chest tightens, your mind races with worst-case scenarios. You want to run, hide, avoid, protect yourself from the imagined pain ahead. But the Buddha pointed out that fear often arises from clinging to what we cannot control. The desire to guarantee safety, to ensure comfort, to freeze life into something predictable, and yet life by its very nature is uncertain. The attempt to avoid all suffering only creates more. Facing fear doesn't mean forcing it down or pretending to be fearless. It means looking directly at it with a steady, compassionate gaze. Ask your fear, what are you really trying to protect? What old story are you holding on to? When you meet fear with mindfulness instead of resistance, it softens. It stops controlling you. You realize fear is just a thought, a feeling. It is not a prison unless you believe it is. The Buddha described this beautifully when he taught about the two arrows. The first arrow is the inevitable pain of life, loss, disappointment, change. The second arrow is the suffering we create by resisting or judging the pain. Fear is often that second arrow, multiplying our suffering. But if we meet the first arrow with awareness, with kindness, we spare ourselves from shooting the second. Shame is a different kind of suffering, but it operates in a similar way. It pulls you backward, tying you to moments you wish you could erase. The Buddha never taught that mistakes make you unworthy. In fact, the entire path is built on the understanding that we are all imperfect beings, learning through trial, through failure, through humility. Shame thrives when we believe we are alone in our flaws. But the truth is, everyone you meet is carrying their own regrets, their own secret bruises. You are not broken, you are growing. In Buddhism, the concept of kshanti, patience, forbearance, is not just about being patient with others, it's about being patient with yourself. It's understanding that healing and transformation are slow, organic processes. You can't shame yourself into becoming better. You can only love yourself into unfolding. One powerful practice the Buddha encouraged was to reflect on cause and effect with compassion. If you made a mistake, instead of falling into self-loathing, reflect. What conditions led me here? What can I do differently moving forward? This shifts you from shame to learning. It moves you from paralysis into mindful action. Self-forgiveness is one of the bravest things you can practice, not because you are excusing harm, but because you recognize that carrying endless guilt only blinds you to the present moment, the only place where change is possible. The Buddha taught that every breath is a new beginning. No matter how many mistakes you've made, you can begin again. Right now, right here. Fear and shame lose their power when you stop hiding from them. When you meet them with honesty and compassion, they dissolve like mist under the morning sun. They are not your enemies. They are signals, invitations to see where your heart still longs for safety, where your spirit still longs for freedom. There's a quiet strength in being prepared for life's difficulties, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The Buddha didn't teach us to expect a smooth, obstacle-free life. He taught us to expect change, challenge, impermanence. And in that simple truth lies a powerful key to resilience. When we anticipate that the path will sometimes be rocky, we don't stumble so hard when we hit a stone. Most suffering, the Buddha explained, doesn't come from pain itself. It comes from our surprise at pain, our resistance to it. We think, this shouldn't be happening, We fight reality instead of moving with it. But when you meet obstacles not as enemies but as natural parts of the journey, your whole relationship to life shifts. You become less fearful, less reactive, more graceful. One of the beautiful practices the Buddha taught was called contemplation of uncertainty. He reminded his followers again and again, relationships will change, health will change, circumstances will change. Everything we hold dear is subject to transformation. At first glance, this can seem unsettling, almost sad. But look deeper. It's not sadness, it's preparation, it's wisdom. When you know that change is certain, you start to cherish what's here right now. You stop expecting permanence where there can be none, and you start training your heart to stay steady even when the winds shift. One simple practice is what some teachers call premeditation of obstacles, quietly reflecting each morning. Today I may encounter impatience. Today someone may misunderstand me. Today unexpected news might come. By gently anticipating these possibilities, you aren't inviting negativity. You're building mental armor. If they happen, you are ready. If they don't, your heart is simply that much lighter. Anticipating obstacles doesn't mean living in worry. It means living awake. It means that when life bumps into you, and it will, you don't fall apart. You don't spiral into anger or despair. You meet it with a mind that already knew, here is a guest I was expecting. Come in. Let me meet you with calmness. The Buddha's own life is the perfect example. After his enlightenment, he didn't retreat into isolation, avoiding the messiness of the world. He traveled, taught, and faced all kinds of challenges, resistance from rivals, misunderstandings, betrayals by students. But because he had already seen deeply into the nature of suffering, he met every obstacle with unshakable equanimity. One way to deepen this practice is by training the mind in adaptability. Life will rarely go exactly as planned. Projects will fail. Friendships will shift. Dreams will change shape. The more rigid your expectations, the harder these changes will hurt. But the more flexible your mind, the more easily you can bend without breaking. Like a bamboo tree that sways with the wind but never snaps. There's something inside you that's stronger than you realize. It's not the kind of strength the world usually celebrates. It's quieter, deeper. It's the strength that carries you through disappointments without losing your heart. The strength that helps you keep showing up, even when the path ahead is uncertain. The Buddha understood that true strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about mastering yourself. And that kind of strength isn't given to you by the world. It's built inside, through patient practice. It's easy to feel strong when life is going our way, when people praise us, when plans unfold smoothly, when everything feels under control. We feel invincible. But life is unpredictable by nature. There will be seasons of loss, of rejection, of loneliness, of doubt. And it's in these seasons that your true strength is forged, not through resistance, but through conscious, compassionate endurance. The Buddha often spoke about perseverance, virya, as an essential quality on the path to awakening. He taught that the effort to maintain goodness, wisdom, and mindfulness, even in difficult times, is itself an act of profound courage. When you face hardships without collapsing into bitterness or hopelessness, you are practicing real inner strength. Think about it like building muscle. No muscle grows without resistance. You need some weight, some tension, some challenge to make it stronger. In the same way, your heart grows more resilient, not by avoiding the hard parts of life, but by meeting them with an open, steady mind. Building inner strength begins with how you meet the small difficulties in daily life. Maybe it's sitting through a difficult conversation without rushing to defend yourself. Maybe it's staying kind when someone else is acting carelessly. Maybe it's choosing patience when your plans fall apart. Each small act of conscious endurance is like placing another stone in the foundation of your unshakable peace. One of the great illusions is thinking that strength means never feeling pain. But the Buddha never said that awakening means you stop feeling. You will still feel sadness, you will still grieve, you will still face moments of fear. But instead of being swept away, you witness these feelings with clarity and compassion. You hold them gently, without identifying with them, without drowning in them. And with time, they lose their power to control you. Another beautiful teaching the Buddha offered is that strength is found in the middle way, not in extremes. Not in hardening your heart to avoid pain, and not in falling apart at every hardship. It's found in living with an open heart and a grounded mind, sensitive to life's beauty and sorrow, but not enslaved by either. And don't forget, inner strength is nourished through community too. The Buddha emphasized the importance of Sangha, spiritual companionship. When you surround yourself with those who remind you of your true nature, who reflect your highest values, your strength is reinforced. When you walk alongside those also striving to live with mindfulness and compassion, it becomes easier to keep moving forward when the road is steep. Above all, remember that building inner strength is not about rushing. You don't need to transform overnight. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. The strength you are looking for is already inside you. It simply needs to be awakened, one mindful, courageous step at a time. Some days that step will be bold and clear. Other days it will be small and shaky. Both are valid. Both are sacred. In the words of the Buddha, endurance is one of the most difficult disciplines, but final victory comes to the one who endures. There's a particular kind of regret that stings the most. The kind that comes from words we wish we hadn't said, actions we wish we hadn't taken, moments when we let emotions lead us into reactions we can't take back. The Buddha understood this human struggle deeply. He taught that while emotions naturally arise, wisdom lies in how we respond to them, not in how loudly we defend ourselves or how quickly we act, but in how steadily we hold ourselves before choosing a path. He often spoke about the power of restraint, not as suppression, not as denial, but as conscious, compassionate awareness of our impulses. Most of the time, the damage in life doesn't come from the feeling itself, it comes from acting too fast on it. A flash of anger is natural, but shouting back in anger, that leaves scars. A moment of jealousy may arise, but acting on it, hurting others or sabotaging ourselves, builds suffering where there could have been understanding. It's in that tiny space between emotion and action that our freedom lives. The Buddha compared the mind to a charioteer guiding wild horses. If the horses are left to run wherever they wish, the chariot crashes. But if the charioteer holds the reins with skill and calmness, the journey becomes smooth. In the same way, our emotions are not our enemies, they are part of the human experience. But if we don't hold the reins with mindfulness, they end up steering our life instead of the other way around. Learning to restrain action starts with something simple yet powerful, the practice of pausing. When something triggers you, an insult, a disappointment, a sudden craving, pause, just for a breath. Feel the heat of anger, the tightness of fear, the pull of desire. Notice it without judgment. And then, before you act, ask yourself quietly, will this response bring more suffering or more peace? Does this align with the person I am trying to become? That pause, however brief, is not a weakness, it is mastery. It's you stepping out of the cycle of reactivity and stepping into conscious living. And each time you practice it, you strengthen the part of you that is free, not trapped by the push and pull of every passing feeling. Restraining action also means being mindful of our words. The Buddha taught that right speech is not just about telling the truth, it's about speaking with kindness, with purpose, with benefit to others. Before speaking, ask yourself, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it coming from a place of goodwill? Sometimes silence is the highest form of wisdom. In daily life, this practice looks like small but powerful shifts. It's choosing to respond calmly when someone is rude, instead of escalating the conflict. It's waiting a few hours before sending an angry message, and often realizing you no longer need to send it at all. It's recognizing when impatience rises in traffic or long lines and using it as a training ground for patience rather than an excuse for frustration. The Buddha taught that restraint leads not to repression but to real joy. When you no longer have to clean up the mess left by angry words, impulsive decisions, or rash actions, your life becomes lighter. You carry less regret, less damage, less unnecessary suffering. Instead, you carry strength, you carry clarity, you carry peace. There's a kind of peace that can't be found by chasing success, controlling outcomes, or forcing life to bend to your will. It's a peace that only comes when you stop fighting the natural flow of existence and start living in harmony with it. The Buddha understood this profoundly. He taught that suffering arises not because life is harsh, but because we resist what is natural, because we cling to what changes, because we demand permanence from a world that is always moving. In Buddhism, to live according to nature isn't about following every desire or impulse. It's about understanding the true nature of life. Everything arises, changes, and passes away. Nothing stays fixed, not our emotions, not our successes, not even the people we love. When we recognize and accept this truth, life no longer feels like an endless struggle. It becomes a dance, a flowing, living thing we can move with, instead of constantly trying to control. Living according to nature starts with living in alignment with your own true nature. The Buddha often spoke of the importance of knowing yourself, not in a superficial way, but deeply seeing your habits, your attachments, your tendencies toward craving or aversion. When you understand yourself with compassion and honesty, you can make choices that are not reactions, but reflections of your highest values. You stop betraying yourself for temporary comfort. You stop getting lost in endless striving. You begin to move through life with greater integrity and less struggle. Part of living according to nature is also recognizing that you are not separate from the world around you. You are not a lonely island trying to survive. You are deeply interconnected with every living thing, the trees, the rivers, the people, even the very air you breathe. When the Buddha taught about dependent origination, he showed that everything we experience arises through countless conditions. Nothing exists independently. And so when you live in a way that honors life, when you act with kindness, with mindfulness, with care for the world, you are living naturally. You are living wisely. Another aspect of living according to nature is accepting imperfection. We waste so much energy resisting flaws, ours, others, the world's. But the Buddha's teachings invite us to see that the cracks are part of the beauty. Just as a lotus rises from muddy waters, your own growth comes from imperfect conditions. Expecting perfection, expecting that you will always feel good, that people will always treat you kindly, that life will always go according to plan, is a setup for suffering. But when you embrace imperfection as part of the design, you move with life instead of against it. Living naturally also means living simply, not necessarily living without things, but living without unnecessary attachment to them. The Buddha left behind a life of luxury, not because things are bad, but because clinging to things distracts the mind from true peace. You can enjoy a meal, a home, a friendship deeply, but without needing them to complete you, without needing them to stay the same forever. This simplicity brings a profound lightness. You carry less fear, less grasping, more gratitude. And maybe most importantly, living according to nature means trusting the unfolding of your life. It means recognizing that even when you don't understand why something is happening, even when pain or loss visit your door, these too are natural. These too are part of the flow that carries you toward greater awakening. The Buddha often taught through nature itself, pointing to the way seasons change, rivers flow, stars rise and fall, all without clinging, all without resistance. In the same way, you can meet each moment with openness. You can meet yourself and the world without the heavy burden of expectation or fear. The journey to inner peace isn't found by chasing a perfect life. It's found in the quiet, steady choice to live wisely, to move gently, and to trust deeply in the unfolding path before you. Every small step you take in mindfulness, every moment you choose compassion over anger, clarity over confusion, you are transforming your life from the inside out. Thank you for walking this path with me and for being a part of Buddhist journey. If you'd like to continue deepening your understanding, I invite you to watch one of the suggested videos on the screen. There's always more wisdom waiting to meet you. Until we meet again, stay grounded, stay mindful, and keep choosing peace.